The orphan girl. I always knew I was adopted. My dad, bless his gruff soul, told me when I was 3. He'd point at a picture of a smiling woman and say, "That's your real mommy, sweetheart. She couldn't take care of you, so I did." My adoptive mom, God rest her soul, passed away just 6 months later. I remember little of her, just the warmth of her smile and the scent of lavender in her hair. After that, it was just me and Dad. Growing up wasn't easy. Dad, despite his love, had a way of making me feel like an outsider. "You take after your real parents," he'd say when I struggled in school. "You're lucky I even took you in," he'd grumble when I misbehaved. The hurt cut deep. Then, when I was 6, he announced to a group of neighbors, "This one's adopted," loud enough for the whole street to hear. The next day, the playground chants began, "Orphan girl. Orphan girl." The teasing followed me everywhere, a constant, cruel reminder of my difference. When I came home in tears, Dad would dismiss it with a careless wave, "Kids will be kids." He even took me to the orphanage on my birthdays, a grim reminder of how lucky I was compared to the other children. For 30 years, I carried the weight of abandonment. I believed I was a burden, unwanted, a piece of unfinished business in someone else's life. My fiancé, Matt, was the first person to truly see the pain I carried. "Maybe finding out more about your biological parents could bring you some closure," he suggested gently. At first, I resisted. What was the point? The past was buried, the wounds too deep. But Matt's persistent love and encouragement chipped away at my defenses. Finally, a few weeks ago, we went to the orphanage my dad always mentioned. The woman at the desk, her face etched with concern, checked her records. "I'm sorry," she said, "but there's no record of you here." My heart plummeted. Matt, sensing my despair, put his arm around me. "It's okay," he whispered, "maybe there was a mistake." But as we drove away, a chilling thought crept in. What if my dad had lied? What if I wasn't an orphan at all? That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of my father's gruff exterior, the coldness in his eyes when I cried, flashed before me. A terrifying realization dawned, maybe I wasn't unwanted, maybe I was stolen. Matt, noticing my distress, gently urged, "We need to talk to your dad." The next day, we went to his house. He looked older, frilier, his eyes clouded with a mixture of fear and guilt. "Dad," I began, my voice trembling, "the orphanage, they said there's no record of me." He avoided my gaze, fiddling with his hands. "Well, then, they must have lost the records," he mumbled. "Dad," I pressed, did you ever tell me the truth?" He looked up, his face a mask of pain. "I married a widow," he confessed, his voice raspy. "She had a young son. He told me one day that his real mom still lived in the house." The world tilted on its axis. I stared at him, disbelief turning to icy anger. "So, you took me?" He nodded, his voice barely a whisper. I couldn't have another child. And she needed the money. The truth, when it finally came, was far worse than any imagined abandonment. I was not an orphan, I was a stolen child, a victim of a man who had twisted my life for his own selfish desires. The weight of that betrayal was almost unbearable. But in the midst of the pain, a flicker of hope emerged. I was not defined by my past, by the lies and the hurt. I was stronger than I ever imagined. I would find my truth, I would find my voice, and I would finally be free.